Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. It's great to have you all here. We're delighted that you're able to join today's webinar to gain some insights and to learn more about the Explorers Mindset Leadership Program. My name's Jeremy Painter, and along with Glenn Peterson, we've developed and co-facilitate this wonderful program in partnership with the Antarctic Heritage Trust. Really, our goal from the start has been to bring an explorer's mindset to modern day leadership, and so more about that soon. Today's session will probably run for around 45 minutes. There's going to be a range of presenters, including world famous explorers, some of our key partners, program facilitators, as well as participants and clients. So time permitting, there will be some Q&A at the end of the session. And we'll share both the recordings and the slides with everyone who's joined after the webinar. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy today's session. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass over to both Glenn, who I've already introduced, but also Marcus. And they're going to talk a bit about why we developed this program. So just a little bit on Marcus Waters first. So Marcus is an explorer in his own right, having been some of the more challenging parts of the world, including both Antarctica several times. And prior to his more recent work in corporate world and HR as an executive, he was actually an instructor at the Outdoor Event Centre for Sir Edmund Hillary Outdoor Pursuit Centre. He's both a partner and a facilitator on this program. So thanks, Marcus, for joining Glenn and myself today. Glenn and Marcus, over to you guys.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. Glenn, I'll just sort of lead off with a few words and then pass over to you. So, kia ora, everyone. My name's Marcus Waters, as Jeremy said. I guess I bring a bit of a contemporary voice to the program, and you'll also be hearing from Lydia very shortly as well. So during the 2000s, I was involved in a number of overseas expeditions, going to places no one had been before, did a couple of world first expeditions, and you'll hear more about that on the program. A couple of years ago, I also worked for the Antarctic Heritage Trust as the commercial and partnerships manager. And it was during that time with the Antarctic Heritage Trust, I became very familiar with some of these polar stories and this amazing legacy of exploration that is involved in the exploration of the last continent on Earth to be explored, Antarctica. And of course, these stories are only just over 100 years old. So in many regards, they're very modern history. But it became apparent to me during learning about these stories and becoming very familiar with the work of the Antarctic Heritage Trust that there was something in these amazing tales of overcoming obstacles, of taking calculated risks, of generating a vision with your team, of actually bringing people together to actually achieve something really quite unique and special. That there was a story in this, and there were lessons that really shouldn't be lost, and that there were lessons that could be applied into the corporate world. And the theme for the program is doing leadership differently. And I saw an opportunity in the market to really hone in on that and draw out those lessons and apply them to the contemporary corporate world. Trouble is, I needed a partner, or we needed a partner that was similarly adventurous and kind of bold enough to take this idea and turn it into a program and into maturity. And I'd worked with Jeremy and Glenn before, and I knew both of their work and their sort of philosophy, if you like, with regard to corporate training. And so I approached Glen and Jeremy and said, hey, look, we've got these amazing stories. We're curators of this amazing history and these legacies. I think there's something in this that's really relevant to today's leaders and today's corporate environment. So Glenn, sort of over to you. I passed the baton to you guys and you picked it up and ran with it.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. Hi, everyone. Look, we were really excited when we heard from Marcus. And, going back, this was during, I think, the front end of COVID, the early years of COVID. And so we'd been running a leadership development program with a fellow called Harold Hillman. Some of you might know Harold, for about 9 years around executive presence. And obviously during COVID, that program got stalled, if I could put it that way, along with a lot of other stuff. So when we were approached by Marcus to think about this leadership program, we were very excited. And I personally, myself, I'd always been a great fan of some of these Antarctic stories, particularly Ernest Shackleton and his amazing adventure and survival on the Endurance expedition. And so given the fact that we had an opportunity to revel in those stories and create what we thought was going to be an exciting leadership development program, we were very happy to join in. And so over the course of those very early years of COVID, we worked with Marcus and the trust and started to build the frameworks of the program, which is now obviously running. We'll talk a little bit more today about it, the programs we've conducted so far. So it's been a great partnership. We've really enjoyed working with Marcus and others at the Antarctic Heritage Trust. And I'd like to tell you a bit more about them at the moment. And normally in these sessions, we'd have Francesca, who's the CEO of the Trust, joining us to say a few words about the Trust. Luckily for her, she's actually heading off to the Antarctic continent as we speak. And so she's been unable to join us live today, but I have a video I'm going to show you in a moment from Francesca, and she'll explain a bit more about what the Trust does and some of the activities that they've been involved with. But essentially, if you don't know much about them, they are a body that's been set up to preserve what you see on your screen at the moment, which are 5 incredible historic huts on the Antarctic continent. I won't try and name each one of those huts at the moment. Essentially, the Trust has this incredible heritage of Antarctic exploration, and we've been really fortunate to be able to tap into that heritage, understand more about the artifacts that are in the huts, how the huts have been preserved, and work in a very collaborative way with the Trust to build out this particular program. So let me tell you a bit about the program, give you a bit of a sense of what the program's about. And so we really designed this program with a view to nurturing the spirit and the adventure of these famous explorers. And these explorers we talk about are from what's called the heroic age of Antarctic exploration, which from what I understand is around 1900 to 1922. And after that, it became the mechanical age, where mechanical devices were used to explore Antarctica. So these are the days where men and dogs mostly headed off to discover Antarctica. Now, it's not to say that these are the only explorers worth examining. And certainly the modern world wouldn't exist without great exploration through history. And in fact, some would say that the greatest explorers were the Polynesians, who set off, many, many years ago to explore the Pacific and eventually land on New Zealand, of course. But the thing is that the thing that makes Antarctica different is that at the time it was the only undiscovered part of the world. It was almost, you'd say, the moonshot, the moon landing of the day. And so it was a fascinating time, the last piece of the Earth worth exploring. And so our central question when we got excited about this program was, well, what could we learn? What could we learn from these long dead, mostly white, mostly male explorers? What could they tell us about leadership that might be relevant today? That was our central question. One of the great things about that time of history is that there was a rich source of diaries, of journals and books that were written at the time. And so there's this very rich heritage of written materials that you can read through and understand and learn and start to ask yourself questions about, well, what were the leadership practices people were using? How did they make decisions? How did they balance up the consequences of these incredible adventures they were going on? And the consequences in those days ranged from incredibly triumphant to absolutely deadly, as we know. So we've always been quite interested in the leadership approach that the leaders of these particular expeditions had. How did they keep themselves, their crews, and their missions together in such challenging environments, and what could we learn from their leadership behaviours? And we figured by focusing on those legends, you've already heard mentioned Shackleton, Robert Scott, Roald Amundsen, and so on. Could we bring some of these timeless leadership lessons into today and make them relevant? And could we create a sense of adventure, of possibility and growth in leaders to meet the challenges of today? And so we started doing quite detailed research and analysis of the early Antarctic explorers. And there's a lot of different books that have been written, not just about the expeditions, but also people have written books around the leadership practices and behaviours of the leaders at this time. And so we did immerse ourselves in a substantial amount of research. It was during COVID. We had a bit of time on our hands, and so it was a good time to really go deep and really understand what was going on, and could we draw some parallels from the different people involved into a leadership framework. And so we came up with a leadership framework that we felt spoke to the nature of the leaders of that time. And so there are 6 attributes in our leadership framework, which I've got on the screen at the moment: curiosity, conviction, loyalty, resilience, risk-taking, and courage. And our hypothesis has always been that these attributes are timeless, that they were relevant 100 years ago, and we believe they are relevant today for leaders. And so through reference to the past, we've drawn insights into how leaders can solve today's problems with a deeper understanding of history, of human behaviour, the struggles against adversity, and how people can respond in really challenging situations. So the program itself is what we call a 4-stage journey. And stage 1 begins with a 2-day immersion workshop in Christchurch. We call that the foundation workshop, which is really an important part of getting the program underway. The participants on the program receive a 360 survey against the leadership attributes that I've shown you. We spend a lot of time understanding the historic stories and the relevance of those stories, as well as encouraging participants to build their own intentions as a leader, almost come up with, if you would say, a leadership motto, how they'd like to see themselves leading. During those 2 days, we explore a lot of Christchurch. It is really the gateway to the Antarctic. A lot of the international Antarctic programs are based around Christchurch. There's a great museum. There's a great Antarctic centre. We even had dinner at the Canterbury Club in a room where both Robert Scott and Ernest Shackleton were hosted for their farewell dinners on their historic expeditions. And so there's a rich sense of history about Antarctica encapsulated in Christchurch. So we know the 2 days works really well in Christchurch, and that's the foundation workshop. Stage 2 then opens up into 6 half-day workshops, which we space out over sort of 4 to 6 weeks. They are delivered normally face-to-face, although some have been delivered virtually. And in those workshops, we explore each one of those 6 attributes in detail. And we really kind of go back in history and look at how those attributes played out in the great Antarctic stories, and then we bring them into the future. And so we try and cast a modern-day lens across those attributes. And in doing so, we bring in some amazing guest speakers. Lydia Bradey, who you'll hear from in a moment, but we bring in an author, an academic, a naturalist, a medical doctor, a bunch of different people who you may not normally meet in your everyday life, who will give their view about each of the attributes. So, for example, we have Charles Darwin's great-great-grandson come and talk to us about curiosity and Charles Darwin's thinking style and how that relates to curiosity. We have a medical doctor who's worked through the mosque shooting and the earthquakes in Christchurch, and he talks about decision-making in the context of a medical operation. So we get some terrific insights into how leadership plays out in different types of situations. The third stage, which is may indeed be the highlight of the program, is what we call the expedition stage. We challenge each group to come up with an expedition themselves and to plan and to train for and execute an expedition, to put themselves in a situation where they are explorers themselves, or where they put themselves up against a challenge, both mentally and physically, to do something different. That seems to have been a great way of capping off the program, to put into practice, if you would, the learnings and the ideas and discussions we've had through the program into an actual expedition. And the goal for each group is that everyone on that program has to get through that expedition together. And if you could imagine, you bring together a bunch of 12 executives, there are different appetites for adventure and physical challenge amongst those 12 people. But the challenge is, just as the classic expeditions did, you have to bring everybody through that expedition together. And then the last stage, and Jeremy will talk a bit about the expeditions in a moment, but the last stage really is we bring everyone back together. There's a celebratory lunch or dinner, reflections on the expedition, and we hope and we trust and we feel confident that people have gone through a kind of leadership development journey that leaves them different at the end, that they've changed their perspective about how they lead, they've become a more compelling, thoughtful leader, they've experienced an expedition that's challenged them in a physical and mental sense, and we've had some terrific feedback from the people who've been through the program already. So we kind of feel like the program does meet its objectives. I'd like to sort of hand over to you, Jeremy, just to kind of talk a bit about the programs that have gone so far, and perhaps just talk a little bit about the expeditions as well.
Sure thing. Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, there's some great stories from those who have been through this program already. And the first group to sign up was the Warehouse Group, which was great. And Richard Parker, the Chief People Officer there, we're forever indebted to his conviction and his commitment to the program. And they chose it because they were going through some significant change in the organisation. And they had a group of high potential leaders who they really wanted to nurture, but also extend and bring together in a program that was different to anything else they had done before. So they were the first to join. The second group was Patty's, and they're an Australasian business headquartered in Melbourne. They produce sort of FMCG food and snacks business. And they were a very different business. They had a very established executive team, and many of them have been through many executive programs before. And their CEO, Paul, saw this program and really seized on it because he saw it as something that was very different, that would probably peel back some layers and cut through, some executives who had sort of been there, done that. So they've been through the program and enjoyed it immensely. And the third group that have gone through an Auckland-based organisation, Frequency. They're a professional advisory and project management business involved in construction and infrastructure. They're a relatively young organisation compared to the other two, fast growing, but certainly established. And their partner group, which was relatively recently established and emerging, was chosen as one where they could see some real stretch and an opportunity to do things differently again. So again, a real opportunity to use this program to build out a team and also challenge the individuals in the team. What are some of the highlights? What we do through the program is we spend, invest in sort of asking throughout the program what's going well, both at a midpoint and an end point. And we get quite a lot of feedback from participants as well, just because we encourage a lot of dialogue. But some of the highlights that have emerged have been just the fact that we're using the Great Antarctic Explorers as a metaphor. It's refreshing, it's a bit different. It's not something that everyone's necessarily all that familiar with. And some of these wonderful stories from the past really still do resonate. And so, the extent that these explorers went to and the challenges they faced and learning about that has been a real highlight. But also understanding that they were not all incredibly capable people. They all had both strengths, but also flaws. And learning about them and understanding that is kind of a sense that, anyone can be an everyday hero. And also beyond the headlines of the Shackletons and of the Munstons, and Robert Falcon Scott. There's also another group of leaders that have emerged who supported this group. And people have loved learning about that. And so we've had individuals who've got onto podcasts overseas, and the quotes and, famous quotes from Shackleton, and others have become very, very prevalent. So that's been a real highlight for everyone. And to some, it's been quite surprising how passionate they've got learning about and using this as a metaphor. A second highlight that's emerged has been this immersion in Christchurch. The experience of going to Christchurch, having a bit of a circuit breaker, going as a team, experiencing everything that Glenn's just talked about, but also at that time really delving into some self-discovery and using it as a chance to orientate themselves to the rest of the course. They come away with a great sense of, wow, it's incredible what these explorers did. Wow, here's what I could potentially do in the sort of self-discovery I've had. And I'm really engaged and ready to go forward in this program. And then, look, finally, there's definitely been feedback throughout the program that it's built a deeper sense of connection between the teams and individuals, and a greater understanding and ability to collaborate and work effectively together. The expedition is also a real highlight. It's a key part in each group's learning experience. Not only do they use the metaphor, they get current research, they have guest speakers, but they actually get to experience it, to try it, to fail it, to feel some pain, but actually ultimately to succeed. So it's been appropriate that in all 3 expeditions, there's been sufficient bad weather to make it a little unpleasant, but not such that it's an absolute disaster. So none of them have faced minus 40 degrees, but there's been rain, there's been snow, there's been hail, there's been a little bit of wind. For the Aussies who came to New Zealand, it got below about 15 degrees. So, it's been good. There's been enough pain. So the concept and experience of the expedition is central to this program. We want to stretch them enough to embed learning and also have something to work toward, as well as including some training and some very open discussion as a group about what the individual and collective ability is. It's all about good stuff. It doesn't have to be daunting. So this group at the top, that's the Paddy's group somewhere in Perth. They did an expedition that included all 3 of their manufacturing sites around Australia, as well as one in Auckland, New Zealand. So they took the expedition to an Australasian level. They did a bike ride, they did a run, and they did a walk. And as part of that, they stopped at each one of their manufacturing sites they had, and they spent time with each of their teams, and they explained why they were doing this and what it was about. They also have made a film of it to create some greater awareness, and have also raised funds for their nominated charity, around 100,000. So they've raised funds from their expedition. The photo at the bottom there is the warehouse group, and Glenn and I were both in that photo. That was very, very cold. That's in Arthur's Pass somewhere. The warehouse group were probably the most adventurous as far as the expedition is concerned. They went coast to coast from the west coast of the South Island to the east coast. They had an outdoor operator who helped support them through that. And so, they had all the best kit and the support and guides. And it was a challenging 3 days. But they ultimately got from one side of the coast to the other, and it was a wonderful experience, great bonding, and a little bit of roughing it, and a real challenge. And the photographs in the bottom right is the frequency team. So they took an opportunity to walk around Great Barrier Island. For them, it was very much a self-guided tour. They didn't have any outdoor operator or guide to help them. They chose where they're going. They stayed in the dock hut. They managed all the planning. They did everything. So they kind of roughed it themselves, but also took on great logistical activity as project managers. It's great to see. So I guess the theme is that the expedition is a central part of the program. It's great fun. It needs to be enough of a challenge, but not overly daunting. And it can be customized really to the group that you have, but a real highlight.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeremy. Would you like to introduce Lydia?
I would like to introduce Lydia.
I'm going to drive your slides, Lydia. So I'll try and keep up with you, and give me the nod if you need to go faster or slower.
Cool. Okay. So look, Lydia. Hi, Lydia.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, Lydia. Let me just do a little intro. Lydia is a world famous mountaineer. In 1998, she became the first woman in the world to climb Mt Everest without supplementary oxygen. To date, she is the only New Zealander to have actually climbed Everest without oxygen, and she's climbed Everest 6 times. Her name is synonymous with courage, resilience, and pioneering spirit in the world of mountaineering. Lydia's story remains an enduring source of inspiration for adventurers anywhere, and Lydia is an anchor speaker on the Explorers Mindset program, and we're delighted to have her join for today's session. Thanks, Lydia.
Hi, thank you. Okay, well, can I have my first, about me, I've been introduced, but I'm also a internationally qualified mountain guide and ski guide. And I'm always working outside of my comfort zone, so I'll explain that a little bit later, but I've specialized on high altitude. So the photo on the right is me coming down on from high camp at about 8,000 meters on Everest. Bottom left is summit of Everest, my second time, where I've got 2 fingers up, and I leave my oxygen mask on because mountain guides wear oxygen, and I'm so proud of guiding. And the little top photo is me on the 7th highest mountain in the world. We made the first New Zealand ascent. Next one, please. So 6 Everests, first female, no oxygen, 5 guiding, guided it more than any other woman. And I'm very proud of guiding. It's my professionalism, just like the professionalism that you bring to your job. So I've climbed 10 8,000 meter summits. Next, please. Thank you. So as I said, I was always super bad at sports, and I go into this more in other presentations, but it was a really big step for me to go into the outdoors. I couldn't do a handstand. I was no good at anything. I would just get C's for sport and A's for everything else. So I discovered tramping, or serious hiking, and through that discovered mountaineering by the use and adoption of mentors. Next, please. I couldn't rock climb, and I ended up in Yosemite Valley, California, which is where the big movie Free Solo was filmed. And I wanted to be up on those big walls. And in those days, people climbed them using a slower form of climbing, not just their hands and their feet, but equipment called aid climbing. So I ended up getting really into this aid climbing and the journey, the expedition. I did 11 big walls, and 8 first female ascents, and 1 very dangerous ascent as well. So even though this girl who had no concept of being an athlete of any kind whatsoever, I was a poet, ended up in these places, unlikely places. Next, please. In 84, 86, 87, 88, 7 Himalayan expeditions, and only the last one, we had a few, very, very small number of Sherpa. But all the time we are carrying our own loads. This is a photo from very, very high. Obviously, it's a photo off a slide, from very high on an 8,000 meter peak. Yep. And then I finished doing my first female ascent without oxygen. My first ascent of Everest was really controversial, and that required a lot of resilience to get through. As a #MeToo situation. I was the wild child, and I was also really strong. And I eventually overcome it, but it wasn't an easy path. But that's way in the past. Okay, thanks. So what do you need to do in order to explore? Well, as we've been explained, as we know about Antarctica or even ourselves, we need the unknown. So in modern days, it's very, very hard to find really true unknown. I mean, if you're doing science or you're exploring deep underwater with, remote machines and things like this, but we can always discover the unknown or explore the unknown within us. And ultimately, that has been the human strength through adversity, through torture, through extreme explorations, through childbirth. We are exploring our unknown, and this is how we become strong. So you need the unknown, but that's easy to find. And you need to be curious. So I call it like outside exploring and inside exploring. This is a photo of the summit ridge, very, very summit ridge of Mt Everest on a busy day. And people have lots of opinions about this, by the way, but we can talk about that on another presentation. Thank you. So normally I fill my presentations with lots of extreme mountains. So you're just going to get a little bit different on this one, just for my entertainment. And here I am. Last year, I went down the Grand Canyon on a self-guided trip. And I'm not a river person. So for me, this was the unknown. Apart from the most extreme and outstanding, stunning big nature, the actual negotiating of the river and not getting caught out and quite serious rapids had, in situations that were quite consequential, was a really big unknown for me. Yeah. And here, last year, I did a hiking trip. So a mountain hiking trip, but well off the path, no formed paths at all, with a woman and her 9-year-old son. Now, we had a mountain range to traverse that was covered in these mountain alpine lakes and really, really rocky. And just beyond that lake, it just plummets off for 1,000 meters. So although it looks like we're just in la-di-da country, it's really, really serious and committing terrain that we're in, because you can't drop off the sides of these mountains easily at all. Like, seriously big country. And here we have this 9-year-old boy who's really amazing. And the weather forecast wasn't very good for the day after this. So we decided to try to do 2 days in one. And for Gwen and I, the mother and I, we were constantly weighing up, can we do it? Is it safe? Well, we had a tent. We were always evaluating and looking at our strengths. And we took a risk for the 9-year-old boy, because I bet half the people I would guide wouldn't be able to do this 2 days in one. The key is the uncertainty of your outcome. Yeah. And we had a fantastic day. Another tops trip. So tops trips where you cruise along the tops of mountain ranges, and this would be in full snow in winter, this place. This is an inspiring national park in Aotearoa, New Zealand. They don't have trails. There's some animal trail I can see in the distance on this ridge, but there's no formed path that's formal. And one of the things about it is it can be just as consequential as alpine climbing, because you have less equipment and less preparation, if you like, and you're not carrying ropes or anything like this. So here we are, la-di-da, and just cruising along this very easy terrain. And then we wanted to go over that knob, or that mountain in the distance. And just before the mountain, where it gets really steep, there was a really steep gut. Now, we had a mutual friend who'd done this before, and there's one thing he didn't say. Okay, the next image. He didn't say there was this really steep gut that was very, very loose, and it's super hard to get perspective on this, but you can see I'm looking down on my friends. And we didn't have any rope, and it was really rotten rock. And all we had to do was get down where my friends are, and then we had some traversing to get out. But there was a lot of loose rock, and anything you pulled on could also come away. You had to climb down very steep stuff, very consequential, and we had no helmet. So there's one thing not having a rope, because you may not choose to have a rope in this terrain, but had this explorer who was there previously, who just said, yeah, there's quite a serious gut there, but you'll be fine, and said, take a helmet, and we would be hugely safer. And so this is part of being a really good explorer, is weighing up how much your helmet weighs versus what kind of consequential situation you're going to be in, be it 20 minutes or 200 minutes, etc. So consequential decision making, when to forge on, when to turn around. Next, please. An explorer, and this is the key. People say, why do you go mountaineering? An explorer embraces the art of decision making. And so much of our times in the mountains, we don't know whether we're going to succeed until the last 100 vertical meter. So even here, we're cruising along this ridge. It's quite exposed, as you can see, and it was a lot of work to get up to that, like very, very physical to get up to this. But it wasn't until the very, very last 50 meter we knew we could stand on the summit in the conditions that we had. And then we had to think we have to get down so we can't have bad weather, all these things. So it's good for your brain. Decision making is really good for your brain, and neurological research proves that the more difficult situations or projects that you have to do, you have to balance it with cortisol and stress. But if you have a hard task and you overcome that, then your brain has more connections. You're more intelligent. Like, decision making makes you smarter. Okay, thank you. So the qualities of an explorer: curiosity. What's it like? Trust. You have to trust yourself, which is that commitment. You have to trust yourself to be able to turn around as well. The ability to turn around, and adaptability. So we were camped here in a really, really remote mountain, trying a first ascent on a 7,000-meter peak in Pakistan, just 2 women. We didn't have space to cook on the ledge, on the snow ledge that we had for our tent, so I had to cut a ledge to stand so I could cook. But I didn't think it was too much. I was smiling. Adaptability. Okay. Self-responsibility, especially in self-maintenance. You cannot be a good leader unless you look after yourself, physically and emotionally. It's fitness, whether it's food. Hardly call noodles food, but there you go. That's 7,000 meters for you. Next. Or fashion. Okay, protection from the elements. So here I am on another 7,000-meter peak in Kyrgyzstan on a mountain called Peak Lenin. Explorers have to embrace type 2 fun, which is not that much fun while you're doing it. It sounded like a great idea, and it's awesome afterwards. So, or as somebody said, everything is hard until it is easy. Next, please. Explorers prepare for the what ifs. In 1986, I was on now it's the highest unclimbed peak in the world. It's the highest mountain in Bhutan. I was the 3rd expedition to get on the mountain, and we were the last expedition to climb on the mountain ever in the world. It's been closed since then. This is a photo looking down the mountain. In order to get down, I had to go through that terrain. And it was really scary, and the winds were really high. So we have to prepare for the what ifs, and we practice. And if our practice isn't big enough, if I haven't had 3 years of mountain climbing before I go there, well, then I don't go there. So it's, you've got so much growth. There's so much potential for growth if you explore life as a world of unknown things for yourself. Okay, thank you. And good explorers choose carefully with whom they share these adventures. Like, you've got to decide on your guide. If they turn up with a car like this, well, maybe you got to choose another guide. No, but it's really important that we look out for our own backs. That's self-responsibility. It's not putting the blame on somebody else. You chose to be in that team. That team, you knew that person was dodgy. It's a very consequential project you're on, whether it's administrative or it's physical. Your responsibility for choosing to be there with that person. And I think that's key too. And I think the other beautiful thing is being an explorer and finding out new things about ourselves. We get these moments of discovery and moments of perfection. And it's the empowerment of decision making. It's the confidence that we get from learning how to make decisions. And it's the joy of saying, well, I don't know how this is going to come out, but I've got enough confidence that if it doesn't work out, well, I know it doesn't work out for me for some reason. Or if it does work out, then it's fantastic. And here we took a punt. We went to Ladakh, which is way northern India. There's no comms, no GPS, no inReach, no satellite phone. You're not allowed to take it in. And we went to a 7,000-meter mountain that none of the staff, anybody of us had been to before. And we summited. And it was just perfect. So that's the why. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. That was great. Very thought-provoking. And there's going to be some time potentially for some Q&A at the end, everybody. We're just running a few minutes late, but we did start a little bit late, so that's good. But thank you, Lydia. That was great. I'm just going to ask or introduce Tim, actually. Tim is on the call. And G'day, Tim. I mentioned Frequency earlier on. So Tim is the managing partner at Frequency, and our most recent organisation that's been through the Explorer's Mindset. So Tim's got about 20 years career experience working in the UK and NZ, and he leads the frequency team here in New Zealand. It's a fast-growing organisation that works right across New Zealand, 5 locations around the country, and he's always keen to develop himself and others, including his lead teams. And so he chose the Explorers Mindset program for his partner group. So thank you for that, Tim. Tim's also an adjunct professor at Auckland University, which I just discovered. So there you go. So Tim, the floor is yours for a few minutes. Thank you for being here.
Oh, kia ora koutou, everybody. I'm called Tim Tokuingoa. Yeah, Jeremy, you make me blush with that introduction, but thank you very much. Hey,
I don't think we've got your camera on.
I don't have my camera on.
No.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, I think it is, yeah.
I can see myself, but I've just done a reboot of that. Anyway, look, I can't see anyone either. I can just see my own name here. So best of luck. Hey, look, I was delighted when Jeremy asked me to talk to you all today about the Explorers Mindset leadership program, and the reason was we've become real true believers of it. One of the reasons for that is there's so much in the market available on how to grow skills, right? How to grow technical skills and management skills. But what attracted us to the course that the team have put together and delivered is that it was about how to grow the person. And we found that really hard to find out there in the market. And I dialed in late, but I think the thing you would have picked up from this is the entire course is delivered through the lens and the framework of the heroic age of Antarctic expedition. And one of the things that struck me and struck us all was just the superlative storytelling that accompanies that era of discovery. And you find yourself identifying with each of the explorers at different times and different challenges. You know, they've all been mentioned, but Scott, Amunds and Shackleton, the different, very different people they were, very different traits they brought to their craft. And but also, and we're very lucky about this, I think, literary geniuses who wrote everything down, it seems, and left us with a catalogue and a legacy of fantastic stories. And so you kind of learn the best through stories, right? But what the team at Explorers Mindset put together is that, but then teaching you real work examples. And I don't know about yourself, but I'm the kind of person who can sit there for a day's course and in one ear and out the other. But this was different. And what I found myself doing was constantly having these moments, right? I've got to write this down. I have to write this quote down and go home and tell my wife exactly what I've just heard. Or you write a single name down, and then you find yourself Wikipedia that night going, I need to know everything there is to know about Shackleton and the Endurance and the expeditions before I'm done with the day. And that was the kind of experience I found it was. And the speakers were incredible. I mean, Lydia, you've just heard from Lydia, and all I'll do is I'll tell you our story of meeting Lydia is we're down at the Canterbury Club. And this was that first day, that total immersion, that first 2 days down in Christchurch there, if you know that part of New Zealand. And we show up to the Canterbury Club, we have dinner and a nice drink, and then Lydia sort of taps the glass and stands up. And Lydia, you had us transfixed for about an hour and a half in a way that I've never seen anyone do, spoke virtually without notes. And for me, I just had this kind of strange kind of experience, I suppose, where it was this tiny person, this amazing person who talked about being stuck in ice caves and gripping on for dear life on the side of a mountain. And I sort of poured another glass of wine, I suppose, and carried on. But and that really set the scene, I think, quite fantastically. And look, you got to brace yourself a little bit on a course like this. It's tough, you know. It starts out pretty mentally tough, right? We have that first kind of, I suppose you have the 360, which you publicly review. There's no hiding, and you also have to sort of, I don't want to maybe give too much away, but you start with a bit of a sort of 15-20 minute who am I talk to each of your fellow participants, and the prompting questions, they test you, right? They are the ones that reveal you asked to reveal your weaknesses, your shortcomings, your fears. And so for our group anyway, there was, plenty of laughs, but tears were close to it too, as you sort of step through those blind spots and understand each other better. And look, I can only speak so highly of how it was organised as well throughout we took 10 months, I think it was, from the first session to the to our own expedition. But so well supported by, I can see Glenn's in the corner there too, Glen and Jeremy, Taryn and the team, lots of reading in advance, lots of check-ins, lots of reviews, picking up on common themes. It definitely feels like a very sort of, I suppose, very well managed, very closely, very personal experience. And yeah, and I'm sure you'll go through the other speakers as well. Jeremy, in fact, I think that might be Marcus in the corner, a very small. Yeah, okay, Marcus as well took us another absolutely fantastic speaker, and all of them really were just people you would never get a chance to hear from and ask questions with and interact with. And so my advice is, if you want to grow people, this is a course I'm certainly a big advocate for and more than happy to be associated with. And look, it's the kind of thing you want to pay due respect to as well. My advice is make sure your team, if you're going on it, they know they've got to carve out time, respect the course, respect each other, and they will get a huge amount out of it.
Thank you, Sam.
All good.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tim. We are at time. We've got a slide here with Q&A. I'm not sure how this is going to work. Maybe if you want to put something in the chat, if you have a question you'd like to ask us in the webinar now, happy to try and respond to that. We could also take any questions after the session via email or getting in touch with us as well. So I'll leave this open for a few minutes and see whether anyone's going to put something in there. I think something just popped up there on the Q&A section. Yes, I think Taryn's just said if there's any questions you'd like to fire in. If we don't get to the answers today, we'll respond and come back to you in coming days as well. Jeremy, I think that's probably we have kept people a little bit longer than we forecast, so apologies for that, and thank you everyone for your time today. We've enjoyed telling you a bit more about our program, and thank you so much for Tim and for Marcus and for Lydia for joining us and to talk about their experiences and how they found the program. And we're quite excited. We love running the program, and so we're hoping that from this webinar you may be inspired to think about some of your team or your company that would benefit from the program. While the first 3 programs, as you've seen, have been conducted what we call in-house, so one single organisation with a cohort of people. We are also open to running what we call open enrolment programs, where they may be participants from multiple companies coming along to the program. So we'll retain that flexibility in how we roll the program out. So I'm just going to sign off from my perspective. Jeremy, over to you for some final words.
Oh, look, I think we'll just put a wrap on it. That was great. Thank you for everyone's participation, and yes, please do reach out if you've got any questions, and we'd be delighted to catch up with you in the remaining couple of weeks or at some stage in 2025. So